when, of course, from the records, the oil exploration started in Nigeria, I think it's 1910 or 1911 or so, when the company that was to explore coal or whatever veered into oil. Then, of course, Shell Diaki came into the current southeastern area in Anambra, started exploring in 1930 to 35, started exploring for oil. Then it was Shell Diaki, before was not successful until when they migrated into the Niger Delta. And I think on 15 January 1956, that oil was discovered in commercial quantity in Oloibiri, the first oil well that you're talking about. And within that period, I think it's about February or so, oil was also discovered in commercial quantity somewhere in Ogoni. So sometimes the Ogoni people will even claim that they discovered oil in Ogoni before the Oloibiri, but the records are clear. The first commercial oil well, 15 January 1956, was in Oloibiri. But then the volume was small, so they did not export the oil until 1958. 1958 was the first time they exported oil out of Nigeria. So, as we grew up in the area, as at that time, the oil industry does not make much sense to the people then. They didn't even know the value of the oil as at that time. Because basically, society was very rural. The government was very far away, and people were satisfied by what they can get from the river, from the bush. Sometimes we just enjoy, especially as children, we just enjoy seeing the white people coming around, playing in the river, and so on. I remember classically when we were in primary school, there was a day 3 helicopters landed in my village, and three. Seeing 3 helicopters, one landed. Then I think it has some problems, so they have to bring mechanics and so on to come and set us to other ones. So it was like, today, but every day when helicopter always land from time to time and just like that. So people were just enjoying seeing these yachts and tugboats and others. So, but it doesn't make sense to even the adults, because then most people, society, don't have enlightened people like you then, because most people didn't know what was happening. It was much later to begin to appreciate the effect of the oil. And that is why we couldn't, as at that time, even agitate for a better deal. Because as at that time, if people were aware, like today, people from the Niger Delta, especially the Yogbe area where oil was first discovered in commercial quantity, would have been big people in Shell. We would have been able to impress on the oil companies to train our young people to become petroleum geologists, petroleum engineers to work. But people didn't even care. People just were interested in being laborers and so on. So even most of the senior people that worked with the oil companies were from either from the present southeast or southwest and so on. That is why they still dominate the oil industry till today, because they still don't give us the chance that we're supposed to. So, but later, the awareness came up, and young people really started revolting, especially the issues of environmental impact of the oil industry, pollution of water, pollution of land, and air pollution. And those things are still there. And I think because of the excessive awareness, since the oil companies didn't start early to look at these things critically, it becomes very difficult for them to manage. So what the oil companies are doing now is to leave out their oil wells that are in land and shallow waters to indigens, and they move into the deeper water. But that's supposed not to be. There is when I was a deputy governor of Bayelsa State, when we visited, I led a team to China, because we were trying to see how we can link up with some companies and so on. And there's a city we visited, I think Dashing, I can't remember exactly the pronunciation. They described it as the oil city in China. And from that visit, it opened my eyes. Oil was discovered in Nigeria, in Oloibiri, 1956. Oil was discovered in China by the same Western companies in 1958. Okay. But so 2 years in Nigeria before China. But as at the time we visited, there was it 2002 or so. Most of the inputs for the oil industry were manufactured in China. While here in Nigeria, even if a valve is to be replaced, that valve, they will go to the parent company. If it is Agip, they must go to France. They have to go to England if it's Shell, or US. So they treated us differently because of the way we look at the oil industry. And the interesting thing about that city, I was calling Dashing, is that within the city there, like as I said, Port Harcourt is an oil city, but you don't see oil wells. But within the city, in front of the offices and in front of the living homes, you see oil wells. And because the pressure from the oil is low, okay. Only immediately you hit the oil, the pressure is so much. So you have to compress it. Yeah. But there, the pressure is low, so it's like water. Okay. So you need the pump to pump out. So you see that on the wells, they install these pumps, and we see these pumps moving this way, and it gives a very nice vista. Initially, I asked, what is happening? This front of this house, this in front of the offices, you see, say, no, those are the pumps. And you see the grass green everywhere, clean. You don't see a drop of oil anywhere. You only see the pump, pumping the oil. And ordinarily, that should have been the basis of the operations in the Niger Delta. But they started carelessly, and probably they look at the cost implications. And rather, instead of the oil companies to improve on how they will manage the oil processes with minimal spillages, they rather say, okay, you Nigerians take over this side that the young people are over disturbing us. Let's move to the deeper waters that we have. No, the communities, women will not come and block road because there's no road to block in the other ocean. See, that is the show, because especially when you ask, the evolution of the oil industry. Those of us who grew up within the area, at that beginning, there was a lot of ignorance, maximum ignorance, and maximum friendship. It was when the awareness came up that these hostilities started, which was much, much later. The oil industry started wrongly. So it's also very difficult for them to fix. But still, they can do a lot. Like you talked about when I was in Umpadeg, I was an assistant director of environmental protection in the Directorate of Environmental Protection and Pollution Control. And we go to some places where pipes burst. Not that people tampered with it. The pipes were old. Yes. So ordinarily, most of those old pipes should have been replaced. And with technology now we talk about youths monitoring pipelines. We're supposed to grow above the level where you carry human beings to be monitoring pipelines. Pipelines should be monitored with technology. So anybody who goes close to attempt to either use explosives, dynamite or whatever, or manual, should be picked. And arrests should be made. But maybe because of the cost implication, maybe because our regulations are weak. So the company, just look, so the company continue to do the same thing. Just look at the gas flaring. If people from other parts of the world, when they come into Nigeria and see the volume of gas we flare, they feel bad. Why will you be wasting so much energy? Gas. In fact, we know it's an associated gas, but you can scrub the gas and you get the clean gas out. And even use the condensate and refine it to get separate PMS, kerosene, and others. So people feel like, how will the country be burning their gas? So from day one, if the regulations were okay as at that time, you couldn't allow anybody to flare gas. That means that if you are coming to mine the oil, you will have to drill that into it. But it was not done, and they already have their oil well scattered. So you place a little fine on it, and they look at the cost of building a plant to gather the gas, and they feel they're paying the fine. It's cheaper for the oil companies, so they continue to pay the fine. So these are the problems. So the starting point was faulty, and who continue to exploit. And if you look at now, we're trying to review the petroleum industry with the new petroleum law and so on, but that's at that time. And as at the time those petroleum laws then were drafted, we had no petroleum engineers. How many petroleum engineers we had? How many petroleum lawyers, petroleum economists, petroleum geologists that we had that could even help us really frame laws that will bind the oil companies? I remember what Museveni, the president of Uganda, told me one time, I think when I was in office. He said, at the time Shell came to Uganda and said that, oh, they want to mine oil. They get to know that, yes, they have oil. And they wanted to start mining. I said, I don't want to get into this problem of Nigeria. So I said, okay, they should wait. So I asked them to come back. So he now called the Minister of Education to get all the young people who read physics and chemistry and quickly send them abroad to read different aspects of the petroleum industry. And the young lawyers to go and read petroleum law. At least let them have their master's degrees in this area. Yes. Even if they will not get PhD first, but they have some reasonable knowledge before we talk with these people. Yes. That is the problem. So we never had people who knew anything about petroleum. Yes. And so a lot of things were done wrongly. So the process of correction is quite challenging. Yes. Otherwise, how will the oil companies prefer to pay fine than to do the correcting? That means that the fine was probably 10% of what they will lose if they are to gather the gas. So these are the challenges of the Niger Delta, and that's why we still have these issues till today, these environmental issues till today. But today it is even more complex. Today, most of the environmental problems are not caused by the oil companies, but are caused by our very people who try to take the crude oil and use locally made refinery and refine. And if you go and take crude oil and use a local system to boil the crude oil, the only thing you can get is diesel. So if you get maybe 30% of the volume, we throw the rest out, pour into the creeks, and cause maximum pollution. If you pass some parts of the Niger Delta, you feel sad. It's caused by the people themselves because they want to sell that. Because it's only diesel. Because if you crack it to those smaller components, you burn down the place because you will not be able to control because they're very highly volatile. Diesel is not volatile. So that is the level, they crack it to the level of diesel and remove the diesel, which is just about 30% of the crude oil. And you pour the rest away.